Hello and welcome to another Seth book analysis. I am back for more. I am back with a vengeance. We will be continuing where we left off, looking into more of Volume 2 of Unknown Reality. And yet again, as you can tell, this is an audio-only recording, and it is not live. It is pre-recorded. And I also, as a side note here real quick, noticed last time that when I had my air conditioner on, it greatly negatively affected the audio quality, which is not something that I anticipated. So this time and from now on, whenever I have to run my air conditioner, I'm going to pause the recording and then turn it off and then unpause the recording so that all of the audio can be high quality. So, without further ado, let us begin. Remember, this, as always, is an analysis of this Seth book, so I will be stopping to comment on it from time to time. And it's also not something that I'm saying that I necessarily agree with, or that any of you should necessarily agree with. It's an analysis. If there's one thing I encourage, it's critical thinking. Question everything, including everything I say. At least that is my advice to you. Alright, so here we go. Session 719, November 11th, 1974, 9:36 p.m., Monday. Jane was so relaxed and quote-unquote floppy before the session that I asked her if she'd rather not have it. She decided that she wanted to try. She's been experiencing many muscular changes and releases in recent days. I read parts of the last session to her to remind us both of what Seth had discussed. At 9:30, Jane said, "There. I'm just beginning to feel him around." Now, good evening. Good evening, Seth. And dictation. I consider my own book, The Nature of Personal Reality, a Seth book, as a prerequisite for the exercises given here in this volume. In that previous book, I discussed the ways in which you form your private experience through your beliefs. You have certain pet ideas, therefore, and you use them to structure your own worldview of the reality that you know. It is important that you understand what your own beliefs are. Many of them might work quite well, quote-unquote, at home, but when you begin to journey away from that home station, you may find that those same ideas impede your progress. Other concepts are really not basically workable even in your own physical reality. A rigid, dogmatic concept of good and evil will force you to perceive physical existence as a battleground of opposing forces, with the poor, unwary soul almost as a buffer. Or you will think of the poor soul as a blackboard eraser slapped between two hands, one good and one evil. Upon the blackboard, in this homey analogy, would be written the soul's earthly experiences. With the eraser, the quote-unquote evil hand would try to rub out all of the good, and at the same time the quote-unquote good hand would be trying to erase all of the evil. In such a case, all of your experience becomes suspect. You will have a tendency to consider the body with its natural appetites wrong, and deny them, while at the same time the physical part of you will look upon your quote-unquote good intents as wrong, and infringements upon its own existence. If you do not understand the natural grace of your being, then when you try some of the exercises given here, you may automatically translate them into a quite limiting set of beliefs. Footnote. In Personal Reality, see the 636th session in Chapter 9, and much of the material in the 4 sessions making up Chapter 12. End of footnote. You are familiar with your own view of the world. As you leave your usual orientation, however, altering the focus of your consciousness, you may very well structure your new experience just as you do your physical one. At the same time, you, underlined, are more free. You have greater leeway. You are used to projecting your beliefs onto physical objects and events. When you leave your home station, those objects and events no longer present themselves in the same fashion. Intently, you often find yourself encountering your own structures, no longer hidden in the kind of experience with which you are familiar. These may then appear in quite a different light. You may be convinced that you are evil simply because you are physical. You may believe that the soul, quote-unquote, descends into the body, and therefore that the body is lower, inferior, and a degraded version of, quote-unquote, what you really are. At the same time, your own physical being knows better, and basically cannot accept such a concept. Footnote. When I come across material that puts down the physical body, I sometimes try to counter such negative projections by turning to one of the technological accomplishments of our quote-unquote degraded species. I study photographs of minute portions of the human body, taken with a scanning electron microscope. Then I experience a series of steps in thinking, not all of them good, I'm afraid, and I'd like to mention each one in turn. At this writing, an electron microscope can magnify the surfaces of tissue samples from 20,000 to 60,000 times. Always the resulting photographs obtained leave me groping as I try to appreciate the beauty, order, and complexity of the human organism at just the greatly enlarged levels shown. If we could plunge quote-unquote down into the body's molecular and atomic stages and see those, we'd find intricacies that are even more unbelievable. Next, I ask myself how such a marvelously structured being can think of its image as inferior to anything, especially since we're far from understanding it even on a quote-unquote mere physical basis, let alone from any sort of non-physical standpoint. Jane's own abilities, for instance, raise questions about certain biological attributes as well as mental ones. In large part, our society still doesn't want to contend with such challenges at this time. Yet, the awe I invariably feel when I study a microphotograph of the retina of the eye, magnified quote-unquote only 20,000 times, is hardly an unalloyed blessing. For next I wonder how the human creature, whose bodily components each possess such a ceaseless, rational integrity, can often function so irrationally as a whole, through the creation of war, poverty, pollution, disease, and so forth. Jane and I hope that her work with Seth is offering insights into these enormous questions about our species' individual and collective behavior. Surely we don't think that atoms or cells, or livers or eyeballs, are irrational. Finally, the incredibly complex physical assemblage of the human being, or of any organism, to confine ourselves to just quote-unquote living entities, always reminds me that according to evolutionary theory, life on Earth arose by chance alone. We must remember that through Darwinism or Neo-Darwinism, science tells us that life has no creative design or any purpose behind it, and that, moreover, this ineffable quality called life originated more than 3.4 billion years ago in a single fortuitous chance combination of certain atoms and molecules in a tidal pool, say, somewhere on the face of the planet. Aside from whatever difficulties I may have about resolving the internal beauties of our physical construction with our external behavior, I hope my deep skepticism about this little quote-unquote official scenario on evolution is apparent here. See Appendix 12. End of footnote. I am drinking a refreshing glass of ice water right now, if anyone is wondering. You know, it's interesting what Seth was just saying. I'd like to comment on this real quick about this idea of the soul descending into the body, because in the nature of personal reality, a Seth book, which I have been sort of studying off and on for a little while now, the physical copy of it, I recently came across his addressing the same idea. And I thought, it's interesting because even in certain occult or esoteric disciplines, we have the same idea of the soul descending into the body. I believe that Seth, at least in the nature of personal reality, was relating it to a Christian idea of the soul descending into the body. But we also have this in other areas, or at least I believe so. For example, I may not be an expert on the Kabbalistic tree of life, but I have looked into it to some extent in connection and conjunction with my studies of tarot especially, and perhaps astrology to some extent as well. And we have this idea in the tree of life of the soul or spirit descending into physical matter. Therefore, with what Seth is arguing anyway, implying some kind of degradation, or implying that something is worse, that there's something automatically bad about physical reality, and something automatically better about non-physical reality, which may in and of itself be a negative belief. Now, some people might think this is a heresy, what I'm saying right now. They might say, how dare you question the Kabbalistic tree of life, or how dare you question things like that are so many thousands, or whatever the amount is, of years old. And I say, I get that. I'm not trying to disrespect these subjects, because I do have a lot of respect for them. I'm just saying that, with all due respect, anything can be questioned, and anything theoretically should be questioned. So just because it's the tree of life, or just because it's whatever, doesn't mean that it shouldn't be called into question, and doesn't mean that it couldn't have some connection with negative beliefs. Certainly any idea, I think, that encourages the inferiority, or so-called inferiority, of the physical, I mean, kind of sort of have to admit that sounds like a negative belief. But maybe there are larger issues to consider there, such as the inherent challenges of one's journey through a human life anyway. In other words, that may be something that is closer to an objective truth, where it doesn't matter what you believe. If you incarnate into a physical human body and have a physical human life experience, you're going to encounter challenges whether you like it or not, and even in this case, whether you believe it or not. I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing these ideas out there. Anyway, let us continue. So in daily life, you may project this idea of unworth outward onto another person, who seems then to be your enemy, or upon another nation. In general, you might select animals to play the part of the enemy, or members of another religion, or political parties. In any case, in your underlined private life, you may hardly ever encounter your belief in your own unworth, or evil. You will not realize that you actually consider underlined yourself the enemy. You will be so convinced that your projection onto others is the enemy that there will be no slack to take up, for all of your feelings of self-hate or self-fear will be directed outward. When you begin to leave your home station and alter your focus, however, you leave behind you the particular familiar receptors for your projections. Using the Ouija board or automatic writing, you may find yourself immediately confronted with this material that you have suppressed in the past. When it surfaces, you may then project it outward from yourself again, but in a different fashion. Instead of thinking you are in contact with a great philosopher or quote-unquote ancient soul, you may believe that you are instead visiting with a demon or a devil, or that you are possessed of an evil spirit. In such a case, you will have already been convinced of the underlined power of evil. Your natural feelings, denied, will also carry the great charge of repression. You may be filled with the feeling that you are in the midst of a great cosmic struggle between the forces of good and evil. And indeed, this often represents a valid picture of your own view of the world. Long pause. None of this is necessary. There is no danger in the exercises I suggest. You are in far greater danger the longer you inhibit your natural feelings, and alterations of consciousness often present you with the framework in which these come to light. If they do not in one way or another come to your attention, then it is very possible that the denied energy behind them will erupt in ruptured relationships or illnesses. Long pause at 10:11. Quote-unquote psychic explorations never underlined cause such difficulties, nor do they ever compound original problems. On the contrary, they are often highly therapeutic, and they present the personality with an alternative to continued repression that would be literally unbearable. If you are normally capable of dealing with physical reality, you will encounter no difficulties in alterations of consciousness or leaving your home station. Be reasonable, however. If you have difficulties in New York City, you are most apt to encounter them in a different form no matter where else you might travel. A change of environment might help clear your head by altering your usual orientation, so that you can see underlined yourself more clearly and benefit. The same applies when you leave your home station. Here the possible benefits are far greater than in usual life and travel, but you are still yourself. It is impossible, underlined, not to structure reality in some fashion. Reality implies a structuring. If you take your own worldview with you all of the time, however, as you travel, even in your own world, then you never see the quote-unquote naked culture. You are always a tourist, taking your homey paraphernalia with you and afraid to give it up. If you are American or English or European, then when you visit other areas of the world, you stay at cosmopolitan hotels. You always see other cultures through your own eyes. Now, when you leave your home station and alter your consciousness, you are always a tourist if you take your own baggage of ideas along with you and interpret your experiences through your own personal, cultural beliefs. There is nothing underlined unconventional about gods and demons, good spirits or bad spirits. These are quite conventional interpretations of experience with religious overtones. Underlined, cults simply represent counter-conventions, and they are as dogmatic in their way as the systems they reject. Underline that sentence. Cults simply represent counter-conventions, and they are as dogmatic in their way as the systems they reject. Give us a moment. When you try these exercises, therefore, make an honest attempt to leave your conventional ideas behind you. Step out of your own worldview. There is an exercise that will help you. Practice element 13. Close your eyes. Imagine a photograph of yourself. In parentheses. Yes, we are finally back to the photographs. Footnote. In Volume 1 of Unknown Reality, Seth incorporated the use of photographs in practice elements 3 through 5 and 7. End of footnote. In your mind's eye, see the photograph of yourself on a table or desk. If you are working mentally with a particular snapshot, Then note the other items in the picture. If the photograph is strictly imaginary, then create an environment about the image of yourself. Look at the image in your mind as it exists in the snapshot, and see it as being aware only of those other objects that surround it. Its world is bounded by the four edges of the picture. Try to put your consciousness into that image of yourself. Your world view is limited to the photograph itself. Now in your mind, see that image walking underlined out of the snapshot, onto the desk or table. Pause. The environment of the physical room will seem gigantic to that small self. The scale and proportion alone will be far different. Imagine that miniature image navigating in the physical room, then going outside, and quite an expanded worldview will result. Take your break. Again, if it isn't obvious, I'm keeping that raw and unfiltered vibe in these Seth analysis recordings, just as I had in the live streams, because that's the way I like it. 10:37. Jane's delivery had been rather fast throughout, except for an occasional long pause. She felt more alert now, she said, but still wasn't as wide awake as usual. She'd been taking a little wine during her trance. At her request, I got her a glass of milk, which she didn't finish before Seth returned. During break, I saw a certain look pass across Jane's tired face. I couldn't describe the expression, but it reminded me of the internal quote-unquote vision I'd had this afternoon when I lay down to sleep. I found myself looking at a very old, very probable future manifestation of myself in this life, who rested quietly in bed. Just before supper tonight, I finished writing an account of what I'd seen, and Jane read it while we ate. See Note 4. Now, as we discussed the event in a little more detail, I made a quick sketch of that possible self of mine. Resume at 11:01. Wow, and as I sit here recording this, it's literally 11 p.m. this minute. Yet again, we have an almost exact same time as in the past. In the past we've had many exact same times, but this is an almost exact same time as I'm reading this and what's in the book. Interesting. Anyway, the synchronicity never ends. Dictation. Many of you do not really want to step out of the photograph or leave your world view, yet in the dream state you are far freer. You can pretend that dreams are not quote-unquote real, however, so you can have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. Different varieties of dreams often provide frameworks that allow you to leave your own worldview under quote-unquote cushioned conditions. You step out of the normal picture that you have made of reality. As Seth, Jane took a swallow of milk. She promptly made a most disapproving face. Her features wrinkled up. Her lips drew back distastefully. She held the half-empty glass of milk up to me, her Seth voice booming out. This is far different from any milk that underlined I ever drank. It is like a chalk with chemicals, far divorced from any cow. Oh my god. That's funny. So I guess Seth did not like modern milk. I agree with him. I agree. Fuck that shit. I do not like milk at all. It makes my stomach feel terrible and it tastes terrible, and I drink almond milk. You guys probably aren't interested in that, but whatever. I drink almond milk because I can't deal with regular milk. Oh, that's funny. Still in trance, Jane set the milk aside. She didn't return to it, but sipped her wine for the rest of the session. I was tempted to ask Seth to explain his idea of what good milk was like, and in what life, or lives, he'd enjoyed such a potion, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the material. While tasting the milk during break, however, Jane, quote-unquote, herself had had no such reaction. That's interesting. Yeah, well. Anyway. Your alterations of consciousness frequently occur in the dream state, therefore, where it seems to you at least that your experiences do not have any practical application. You imagine that only hallucinations are involved. Many of your best snapshots of other realities are taken in your dreams. Footnote. All in Volume 1, Note 1 for Session 698 contains quotations from the dream material Seth gave in the 92nd session for September 28, 1964. Then see the equally interesting information on dreams in Session 699. I especially like Seth's statement that, quote, in a way, one remembered dream can be compared to a psychological photograph, end quote. Jane's poem, My Dreaming Self, is presented in the notes following that session, along with references to other dream material. End of footnote. They may be over or underdeveloped, and the focus may be blurred, but your dreams present you with far more information about the unknown reality than you suppose. In the most intimate of terms, your body is your home station, so when you leave it, you often hide this fact from yourselves. In your sleep, however, your consciousness slips out of your body and returns to it frequently. You dream when you are out of your body, even as you dream inside it. You may therefore form dream stories about your own out-of-body travel, while your physical image rests soundly in bed. The unknown reality, you see, is not really that mysterious to you. You only pretend that it is. Sometimes you have quite clear perceptions of your journeys, but the actual native territories that you visit are so different from your own world that you try to interpret them as best you can in the light of usual conditions. If you remember such an episode at all, it may well seem very confusing, for you will have superimposed your own worldview where it does not belong. 1116. In dream travel, it is quite possible to journey to other civilizations, those in your past or future, or even to worlds whose reality exists in other probable systems. There is even a kind of quote-unquote crossbreeding, for you underlined affect any system of reality with which you have experience. There are no closed realities, only underlined apparent boundaries that seem to separate them. Footnote. See Note 2 for Session 688 in Volume 1. End of footnote. The more parochial your own worldview, however, the less you will recall of their dreams or activities, or the more distorted your quote-unquote dream snapshots will be. Now here is another brief but potent exercise. Also, I just want to say real quick to you guys, I think I wore myself out a bit earlier from the workout that I had. So if I seem a little out of it in this recording, I apologize, but that's probably why, because I feel not quite as stable as usual, I guess, physically speaking. In fact, the reality of it is my workouts are getting, I don't know, they almost seem to be getting harder and harder. I know that today it was really hard, and so I'm actually wondering if maybe with my physical condition being what it is and my heart issues and all of that many of you know about by now if you've been following these videos for a while. It might be getting to the point where I don't know if I can continue doing those kinds of really intense workouts, and I might just have to, I don't know, go for walks or something and do that for exercise, or maybe just do like, I don't know, little bits of exercise here and there, like some push-ups here, some sit-ups there, something like that, because yeah, I don't know. And actually, I'm almost wondering lately if maybe my physicality is pushing me into that at this time in my life, because my broader intention is to be a far more like calm, peaceful, spiritual being, rather than someone who is always such a warrior, I guess. Like maybe I'm meant to be a spiritual warrior, an intellectual warrior, and not really so much of a physical one. I really don't know yet at this point. However, there's also the reality that Mars just entered my 12th whole sign house. I think it was just yesterday, and will be there until October 4th. And in that period of time, I may very well have less physical energy. Mars in the 12th, that's just what happens. And there's also the increased wow, that sounded weird. I misspoke. There's the increased risk of getting sick during that time as well, for me until October 4th. And by the way, if any of you out there are also a Libra rising, that applies to you. Or hell, even if you're a Libra sun, or maybe even Libra moon, it might also apply to you, though not necessarily with as much accuracy. But yeah, so I have that to look forward to for the next like month and a half or whatever it is until October 4th. Like basically being extra tired all the time and maybe not having as much physical energy or wherewithal or whatever, but you know, happens about every 2 years when Mars enters Virgo, because that is my 12th whole sign house. But anyway, or maybe all of this is somewhat illusory, because later in this very Seth book that we are analyzing, Seth goes into his own opinions about astrology. And, well, I haven't read very much of it, and I can't necessarily sum it up right now. It seems like he's saying that while astrology is accurate, it's not giving the full story. Interestingly enough, for it's only giving one line of probabilities. Now, I'm not sure what I think of that just yet, but we'll analyze that when that time comes. We'll get to that section when we get to that section. For now, let us focus on this section. Practice element 14. Before you go to sleep, tell yourself that you will mentally take a dream snapshot of the most significant dream of the night. Footnote. See the 710th session for Seth's material on dreams and the quote-unquote snapshots the conscious mind can learn to take during out-of-body travel. End of footnote. Tell yourself that you will even be aware of doing this while asleep, and imagine that you have a camera with you. You mentally take this into the dream state. You will use the camera at the point of your clearest perceptions, snap your picture, and, mentally again, take it back with you so that it will be the first mental picture that you see when you awaken. You will, of course, try to snap as good a picture as possible. Varying results can be expected. Some of you will awaken with a dream picture that presents itself immediately. Others may find such a picture suddenly appearing later in the day, in the middle of ordinary activities. If you perform this exercise often, however, many of you will find yourselves able to use the camera consciously even while sleeping, so that it becomes an element of your dream travels. You will be able to bring more and more pictures back with you. These will be relatively meaningless, however, if you do not learn how to examine them. They are not to be simply filed away and forgotten. You should write down a description of each scene and what you remember of it, including your feelings both at the time of the dream and later when you record it. The very effort to take this camera with you makes you more of a conscious explorer and automatically helps you to expand your own awareness while you are in the dream state. Each picture will serve as just one small glimpse of a different kind of reality. You cannot make any valid judgment on the basis of one or two pictures alone. Now, this is a mental camera we are using. There is a knack about being a good dream photographer, and you must learn how to operate the camera. In physical life, for example, a photographer knows that many conditions affect the picture he takes. Exterior situations then are important. You might get a very poor picture on a dark day, for instance. With our dream camera, however, the conditions themselves are mental. If you are in a dark mood, for example, then your picture of inner reality might be dim, poorly outlined, or foreboding. This would not necessarily mean that the dream itself had tragic overtones, simply that it was taken in the quote-unquote poor light of the psyche's mood. Pause at 11:40. As long as there's a pause in the book, I'm going to pause right now because I need a tissue. So I'm going to pause the recording and be right back. Okay, I'm back. So let us continue. Inner weather changes constantly, even as the exterior weather does. One dream picture with a dreary cast, therefore, is not much different from a physical photograph taken on a rainy afternoon. Many people, however, remembering a dark dream, become frightened. You even structure your dreams, of course. For that matter, your dream world is as varied as the physical one. Each physical photographer has an idea of what he wants to capture on film, and so to that extent he structures his picture and his view. The same applies to the dream state. You have all kinds of dreams. You can take what you want, so to speak, from dream reality, as basically you take what you want from waking life. For that reason, your dream snapshots will show you the kind of experience that you are choosing from inner reality. Pause at 11:46. Give us a moment. End of dictation. Seth spent the next 6 minutes or so giving some personal material for Jane. Then, as he was about to wind up the session, "Can I ask a question?" "You may indeed. What about my little view of myself this afternoon as a very old man?" Now, it represented two things: an association with a definite past old age sensation, and a quote-unquote precognitive moment in this life that you have not as yet encountered. Because you were because you were psychically open, the position of your body and head acted as the associative bridge between the two events. You were not senile in either. My heartiest regards and a fond good evening. Thank you very much, Seth. Good night. 11:56 p.m. Seth's comments on my experience certainly illustrate his notions of simultaneous time to some extent, since from my quote-unquote present, I perceived aspects of myself in the reincarnational quote-unquote past, as well as in the quote-unquote future in this life. See Note 4. In ordinary terms, I can only wait, of course, to see if I decide to create that distant probable moment in this reality. In the meantime, I have no conscious memory of being an old man, let alone one in the specific, dependent situation in which I saw myself. However, aside from the idea of simultaneous time, I do believe that an individual can touch upon at least some of his or her earlier lives, provided enough long-term effort is given to the endeavor. Since through my internal vision I evidently looked in upon a particular past life of my own, however unaware I was of what I was doing, it seems that the knowledge of that existence may not be too deeply buried within my psyche. I might try jogging my memory through suggestion to see what else about that life I can recall. It would also be interesting to see whether the same technique could help me tune into my future in this life. But the big thing is finding the physical time to try everything I'd like to do, just as it is with Jane. Alright, that is indeed the end of that session. Next up is session 720, which we will begin in just a moment. Okay, let us now continue with session 720. Session 720, November 13th, 1974, 9:55 p.m., Wednesday. Just as she had this afternoon, Jane quote-unquote picked up a little material from Seth at 9 this evening. I'll cover both episodes in the notes at the end of the session. Good evening. Good evening, Seth. Dictation, whispering. Now, if you take a physical camera with you today and snap pictures as you go about your chores, walk, or talk with friends, then you will have preserved scenes from the day's activities. Your film, however, will only take pictures today, underlined of today. No yesterday or tomorrow will suddenly appear in the snapshots of the present. The photographer in the dream world, though, will find an entirely different situation, for their consciousness can capture scenes from entirely different times as easily as the waking photographer can take pictures of different places. Unless you realize this, some of your quote-unquote dream albums will make no sense to you. In waking life, you experience certain events as real, and generally these are the only ones that can be captured by an ordinary photographer. The dream world, however, presents a much larger category of events. Footnote. The reader can also refer to Seth's material on dreams in chapters 8 and 10 in Seth Speaks, and chapters 10 and 20 in Personal Reality. End of footnote. Many events may later appear as physical ones, while others just as valid will not. The dream camera, therefore, will capture probable events also. When you awaken with the dream photograph in mind, it may appear meaningless because it does not seem to correlate with the official order of activities you recognize. You may make one particular decision in physical and waking consciousness, and that decision may bring forth certain events. Using your dream camera, you can with practice discover the history of your own psyche and find the many probable decisions experienced in dreams. These served as a basis from which you made your physical decision. There is some finesse required as you learn to interpret the individual pictures within your dream album. This should be easy to grasp, for if you tried to understand physical life having only a group of snapshots taken in different places and in different times, then it would be rather difficult to form a clear idea of the nature of the physical world. The same applies to dream reality, for the dreams that you recall are indeed like quick pictures snapped under varying conditions. No one picture alone tells the entire story. You should write down your description of each dream picture, therefore, and keep a continuing record, for each one provides more knowledge about the nature of your own psyche and the unknown reality in which it has its existence. Give us a moment. When you take a physical photograph, you have to know how your camera works. You must learn how to focus, how to emphasize those particular qualities you want to record, and how to cut out distracting influences. You know the difference between shadows, for example, and solid objects. Sometimes shadows themselves make fascinating photographic studies. You might utilize them in the background, but as a photographer you would not underline confuse the shadows with, say, the solid objects. No one would deny that shadows are real, however. Now, using an analogy only, let me explain that your thoughts and feelings also give off shadows, intently, that we will here call hallucinations. Footnote. Seth's creative use of hallucinations here is certainly at variance with the concepts ordinarily associated with the word. In a dictionary, for instance, hallucinations may be described as sights and sounds apparently perceived. Hallucinations are tied in with some mental disorders, with objects not actually present. Logically enough, then, in the dictionary one of the synonyms for hallucination will be a word like delusion, a belief not true, a persistent opinion without corresponding physical evidence. End of footnote. They are quite valid. They have as strong a part to play in dream reality as shadows do in the physical world. They are beautiful in themselves. They add to the entire picture. A shadow of a tree cools the ground. It affects the environment. So hallucinations alter the environment. but in a different way and at another level of reality. In the dream world, hallucinations are like conscious shadows. They are not passive, nor is their shape dependent upon their origin. They have their own abilities. For some reason I wanted to say capabilities. Maybe they have those too, who knows. Physically, an oak tree may cast a rich, deep shadow upon the ground. It will move, faithfully mirroring the tiniest motion of the smallest leaf, but its freedom to move will be dictated by the motion of the oak. Not one oak leaf shadow will move unless its counterpart does. Following our analogy, in the dream world, the shadow of the oak tree, once cast, would then be free to pursue its own direction. Let me make sure that I'm understanding all of this. Let me just go back for a moment here. Let's see. So hallucinations alter the environment, but in a different way and at another level of reality. In the dream world, hallucinations are like conscious shadows. They are not passive, nor is their shape dependent upon their origin. They have their own abilities. Interesting. The shadow realm. Following our analogy, in the dream world, the shadow of the oak tree, once cast, would then be free to pursue its own direction. Not only that, but there would be a creative give and take between it and the tree that gave it birth. Anyone fully accustomed to inner reality would have no difficulty in telling the dream oak tree from its frisky shadow, however, humorously. Any more than a waking photographer would have trouble distinguishing the physical oak tree from its counterpart upon the grass. When you, a dream tourist, wander about the inner landscape with your mental camera, however, it may take a while before you are able to tell the difference between dream events and underlined there shadows or hallucinations. So you may take pictures of the shadows instead of the trees, and end up with a fine composition indeed, but one that would give you somewhat of a distorted version of inner reality. So you must learn how to aim and focus your dream camera. Pause. In your daily world, objects have shadows, and thoughts or feelings do not. So in your dream travels, simply remember that underlined there, quote-unquote, objects do not possess shadows, but thoughts and feelings do. And just for the sake of clarity, the form of there that was underlined in that last sentence was THERE, as in implying a location, not the possessive form of there. So with that in mind, I will again read that saying, so in your dream travels, simply remember that there, quote-unquote, objects do not possess shadows, but thoughts and feelings do. Since these are far more lively than ordinary shadows, and are definitely more colorful, they may be more difficult to distinguish at first. You must remember that you are wandering through a mental or psychic landscape. You can stand before the shadow of a friend in the afternoon, in waking reality, and snap your fingers all you want to, but your friend's shadow will not move one whit. It will certainly not disappear because you tell it to. In the dream world, however, any hallucination will vanish immediately as soon as you recognize it as such, and tell it to go away. It was cast originally by your own thought or feeling, and when you underlined withdraw that source, then its quote-unquote shadow is automatically gone. Do you want a break? 10:40. No, I said, although Seth's pace had been good. And right here, right now, it is 11:40, for those who may be interested in such apparent synchronicity. Give us a moment. A stone's physical shadow will faithfully mirror its form. In those terms, little creativity is allowed it. Far greater leeway exists, however, as a thought or feeling in the dream world casts its greater shadow out upon the landscape of the mind. Moods obviously exist when you are dreaming as well as when you are waking. Physically, the day may be brilliant, but if you are in a blue mood, you may automatically close yourself off from the day's natural light, not notice it, or even use that natural beauty as a counterpoint that only makes you feel underlined more disconsolate. Then you might look outward at the day through your mood and see its beauty as meaningless or even cruel facade. Your mood, therefore, will alter your perception. The same applies in the dream state, but there, the shadows of your thoughts may be projected outward into scenes of darkest desolation. In the physical world, you have mass sense data about you. Each individual helps form that exterior environment. No matter how dark your mood on any given sunny day, your individual thoughts alone will not suddenly turn the blue skies into rainy ones. You alone do not have underlined that kind of control over your fellow's environment. In the dream world, however, such thoughts will definitely form your environment. Stormy dream landscapes are on the one hand hallucinations cast upon the inner world by your thoughts or feelings. On the other hand, they are valid representations of your inner climate at the time of any given dream. Such scenes can be changed in the dream state itself if you recognize their origin. You might choose instead to learn from such hallucinations by allowing them to continue, while realizing that they are indeed shadows cast by your own mind. Take your break. 10:52 to 11:12. Now, if you are honest with your thoughts and feelings, then you will express them in your waking life, and they will not cast disturbing shadows in your dreams. You may be afraid that a beloved child or mate will die suddenly, yet you may never want to admit such a fear. The feeling itself may be generated because of your own doubts about underlined yourself, however. You may be depending upon another such person too strongly, trying to live your own life second-handedly through the life of another. Your own fear, admitted, would lead you to other feelings behind it, and to a greater understanding of yourself. Isn't that the truth? So many people have so much resistance that they are completely unaware of. They'll think, oh, if this happens, it's unthinkable. If that happens, it's unthinkable. This thing absolutely cannot happen. Like, X, Y, or Z absolutely must not happen, or everything is ruined, or it's the end of the world. It's a total power trap. I see people immersed into it or sort of fall for that all the time, and it's a total power trap. Whereas the reality is, if you have that kind of fear that there is something in your life that absolutely must not go a certain way, or something absolutely must not happen, then you are in resistance to that thing, and you must do whatever you need to do to accept the possibility of that happening if you want to be free of that resistance. Oh, and by the way, I hate to tell you, but as the great psychoanalyst Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. So if you're resisting something that you are terrified of happening, you are making it far more likely to happen by your resisting of it. So this isn't just some theoretical thing of like, by the way, you'll be emotionally healthier or happier if you release your resistance to the things that you fear. No, you might want to kind of get on that, because every moment that you're in resistance to them, you're attracting them. Just, to let you know. Unencountered in waking life, however, the fear might cast its dim shadow, so that you dream of your child's death, or of the death of another close to you. The dream experience would be cast into the dream landscape and encountered there. Period. If you remembered such a dream, therefore, you might think that it was precognitive, and that the event would become physical. Instead, the whole portent of the dream event would be an educational one, bringing your fear into clear focus. In such cases, you should think of the dire dream situation as a shadow, and look for its source within your mind. Shadows can be pleasant and luxurious, and on a hot sunny day you are certainly aware of their beneficial nature. So some dream hallucinations are beautiful, comforting, refreshing. They can bring great peace and be sought after for themselves. You may believe that God exists as a kindly father, or you might personify him as Christ or Buddha. In your dreams you might then encounter such personages. They are quite valid, but they are also hallucinations cast by your own thoughts and feelings. Dreams of heaven and hell alike fall into the same category, underlined in those terms, as hallucinations. Now, the physical shadow of a tree bears witness to the existence of a tree, even if you see only the shadow, so your hallucinations appearing in dreams also bear witness to their origin, and give testimony to a valid, quote-unquote, objective dream object that is as quote-unquote solid, slowly, in underlined that reality as the tree is in your world. Long pause at 11:32. In physical reality, there is a time lag that exists between the conception of an idea, say, and its materialization. Beside that, other conditions operate that can slow down an idea's physical actualization, or even impede it altogether. If not physically expressed, the thought will be actualized in another reality. An idea must have certain characteristics, for example, that agree with physical assumptions before it turns into a recognizable event. It must appear within your time context. In the dream world, however, each feeling or idea can be immediately expressed and experienced. The physical world has buildings in it that you manufacture. That is, they do not spring up naturally from the ground itself. In the same way, your thoughts are quote-unquote manufactured products in the dream world. They are a part of the environment and appear within its reality, though they change shape and form constantly, as physically manufactured objects do not. The earth has its own natural given data, however, and you must use this body of material to form all of your manufactured products. The dream world also possesses its own natural environment. You form your dreams from it, long pause, and use its natural products to manufacture dream images. Few view this natural inner environment, however. Give us a moment. End of dictation. 11:44. Speaking as Seth, Jane now delivered 2 pages of material for herself and me. Embedded within it were these lines, quote, "Rupert's idea did come from me, about your reincarnational episodes involving the Roman officer, and your personal experience illustrates what I am saying in unknown reality. The individual's history underlined is written in the psyche, and can indeed be uncovered." End quote. Note Seth's heading for this section 5, for example. Twice today Jane had tuned into very similar concepts while going about her daily business. "I'm sure I got that from Seth," she told me after the first such instance had taken place this afternoon. "Not only about your reincarnational stuff, but your thing as the old man, as described in Note 4 for the 719th session. And the history of the species is written in the mass psyche in just the same way." End quote. My quote-unquote 3 Romans are presented in the first notes for the sessions 715 through 16. I'm quite concerned by some of the questions these experiences have raised, especially the possible time contradictions with some of my other supposed past lives. I plan to soon explain these rather cryptic references. In the meantime, my little psychic adventures continue to flow. I regret that I seldom seem to find the physical time for more than very quick sketches relative to any of them. Tonight's session ended, then, at 12:04 a.m. Alright, that's it for that session. According to the Kindle app, the next one will take about 50 minutes to read. So, I think that's probably best left for next time. So, alright, give me a moment, and I will sort of wrap things up, make a couple remarks, and then that'll be it for now. Alright, so indeed, next time we'll continue with session 721, so I can give you guys a little preview of what that is going to be about here. Let me just find it real quick. This app is supposed to keep that area marked, but it doesn't do that sometimes for some reason. Alright, session 721, The Dream World as the Mirror of the Psyche, Waking While Dreaming, practice elements 15, 16. After that, in session 722, it's pseudo-objects and neurological ghost images, you and your counterparts. Alright, sounds delicious. So I want to thank all of you out there for checking this stuff out. I know that this isn't the most popular material on this channel, but I continue to do it because it excites me, as always. As I see in the analytics data and all that, what continues to be most popular in this channel is all of the paranormal themed stuff. But don't worry, perhaps I can do some more of that in the near and maybe distant future as well, depending on how various things go. I will have more information on all of this soon enough. In the meantime, I have to say, especially with the issues I've been running into lately technologically, I am in almost desperate need of funding right now. So if you can spare $1 or $2 or more, there will be a link to my PayPal in the description. It's paypal.me/poetic-heretic, where you can just donate directly in that way if you would be so kind. If you don't have money to donate, I totally understand. That's totally fine. And I am more than grateful for your just checking this out, listening to my analysis of this Seth material, and also hearing what I have to say. So thank you for that. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to cover before the end of this? Not that I can think of at this time. If there was, then we'll just have to save it for later. So, thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.